After playing hundreds of land battles as the Ogre Kingdoms, there is one particular unit who I absolutely adore with their versatility and combat effectiveness. It is not as big and scary as some of these giant ogre monsters, it doesn't have the destructiveness of the artillery, hell it ain't even the ogres itself. No, my favorite unit of them all are these unassuming little gits, the Gnoblar trappers. Absolutely horrifying stat line, terrible leadership, basically expandable chaff, but they are absolutely crucial and irreplaceable to the Ogre Kingdoms in many ways. In this unit focus episode, we'll be analyzing this dirt cheap missile infantry of the Ogre roster and show you why you should bring them more often in battles. Now let's start with their role as a missile infantry, which is quite good for themselves. Being a cheap fodder, they don't have exactly the most missile strength, but they make it up with their numbers, 160 models, and with that volume of firepower, even against heavy armored targets, they can still do some decent damage. You can see that this unit of Gnoblar trappers, with only half the models left, they only have half the DPS, and yet with only a couple volleys, they still earn back 1/4 of their entire unit's value. They are not even shooting at low armored targets, and instead shooting at Kugal, who has 70 armor himself, and on top of that, 20% physical resistance to mitigate those missile damage. That said, the greatest strength of Gnoblar trappers comes from their ability to deal with unarmored monsters, a unit type that the Ogre Kingdoms doesn't have other great tools to counter. The best example among them is the Chaos Spawn, unbreakable great damage dealer. Even if you throw some expensive anti-large ogre units at them, they will still rely on that unbreakable trait to tar pit your units, while your light armored man-eaters takes massive damage from them, or the expensive Sky Crusher DPS are wasted on these unarmored bodies. So what you can do as a cheaper solution is to throw a Gnoblar infantry, tie down those Chaos Spawns, then shower them with scrap metal from 2 Gnoblar trapper units. Compared to man-eaters and Sky Crushers, this Gnoblar combo is much cheaper at only 1000 gold cost, same as the Chaos Spawns. And they eliminated those spawns in roughly the same amount of time as the Man-Eaters and Sky Crushers, taking minimal damage in the process, only losing that generic Gnoblar. Now, Gnoblars do have one weakness, it is their range, with only 70 range when compared to other missile infantry of the same class, like say peasant archers of the Bretonnian army. However, what they lack in range, they make it up with survivability. In terms of reaching their targets, they are actually much better than other missile infantry of the same class, simply because they have this attribute, stalk, allowing them to hide in plain sight, avoiding missile fire from enemy targets before they get into range, as they cannot be locked on by artillery shots. As you can see here, Soul Grinders, they were not able to directly target these Gnoblar trappers, and the Gnoblar trappers were able to make it into the front line with most of their units intact. If this was, say, Bretonnian or High Elf archers, they would have taken massive casualties and even broken by the severe bombardment. In contrast, these Gnoblars safely reached the front line, unleashing a torrent of scrap metal into their opponent's ranks. Of course, if the Gnoblar trappers are merely a cost-efficient missile infantry, I wouldn't be giving them such high praises. They are more than just a missile infantry. In fact, they are such a versatile unit that can fulfill different combat functions. Aside from shooting, they are also an excellent tar-pitting tool. They have pretty poor stat line, basically same as the melee Gnoblar while being double the cost, but they still have that 160 model size, which is quite a bit of models and HP to cut through. And when defending an expensive missile backline like these lead belchers, the Gnoblar trappers can effectively delay enemy anti-large infantry advance, like for example halberds and these spears of Tinge over here. And with the Tinge spears pinned down in the front, the lead belchers at the back were able to safely blast away the poor chaos halberds of Tinge. Spears and other anti-large infantry are mostly designed to kill monsters, surround them and whatnot, but when they're fighting against hordes of infantry, they simply do not have the offensive stats to clear out large amounts of enemies. So even if the Gnoblar trappers were forced to fight the more elite Chaos Halberds, they can still buy enough time for the quite swift and agile Ogre artillery to either reposition or fire away, expending as much ammo as possible. And even after fighting the Tinge spears for a full minute being blasted by the pink fire of Tinge, it still took the Tinge army to drop a treason of Tinge, lowering their leadership for them to break. and at this point the siege infantry push has lost most of its momentum. Another major advantage of Gnoblar trappers is that they have this ability called Gnoblar traps, reducing charge speed and also charge bonus, but more importantly, it slows down enemy units. You can see that over here. These Dragon Ogres now slowed down to 35 speed, easily caught up by the Man-Eaters who can chase after them and finish them off. The Marauder horses are also affected by the ability for a short while, being slowed down by quite a bit, allowing other units to pin them down. While over here, the Gnoblar trappers activated the ability on the Chaos Warriors with halberds, who are now slowed down, unable to push for the rather exposed Lead Belcher's backline right now, giving them the time to fire at other units, while the Chaos Warriors were slowly waddling over with only merely 15 speed, as there are more Lead Belchers who are repositioning over, ready to shoot them to pieces. Other than slowing down infantry, they can also slow down monsters, giving them a harder time to push through your infantry and get to your backlines. The ability also does some negligible damage, so that is a bit of a cherry on top. Overall, I think the Gnoblar trappers are often underestimated for what they can do. Especially a lot of players tries to deploy them in vanguard, separating them from the main army formations, allowing them to be charged down by enemy mobility and whatnot, which they are extremely vulnerable to. They cannot play a skirmishing role simply because they do not have the speed, range, and 360 firing arc like other skirmishing infantry, especially when the Ogre Kingdoms do not have that kind of mobility to protect them from enemy pursuit. Instead, their most suitable position is behind the front line. It is the perfect position for them to utilize their missile capacity, shoot up any unarmored threats. When the first line of Ogre and Gnoblar defense breaks, they will be in position to intercept the incoming enemies. At this point, they will use their numbers advantage or that Gnoblar's trap to slow down enemy advance, providing a little bit more buffer zone to the missile backline. And due to their dirt cheap cost at only 400 gold, it is extremely easy for them to earn back their cost even if you need to throw them into melee halfway through the battle. With the same stat line as the generic Gnoblars, they can even act as an emergency melee unit should the need arise. These tiny and cunning Gnoblars might not be the most intimidating unit on the Ogre roster, but they fulfill multiple crucial functions for the Ogre Kingdom's army, making them an important unit for the Ogres despite their tiny size.